Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Saturday morning. This is a Dhamma talk, Dhamma conversation, Dhamma reflections from the Clear Mountain Monastery. And today we will be discussing a really beautiful discourse of the Buddha in the Anguttara Nikaya, the numbered discourses of the Buddha, the book of the sevens. So all of the discourses in this book have 7 things. They're comprised of 7 different things. And yes, the name of this discourse is the Dhammaññū Sutta. It's Anguttara Nikaya 7's number 68. So I will begin by offering the traditional homage to the Triple Gem, and then we'll begin discussing and fleshing out the meaning of this discourse. And as usual, we will have about half an hour of reflection and thoughts on different aspects of this discourse. And then after that, we'll open it up to questions. So anybody who has any questions can just jump right in and type your questions in the chat box on YouTube. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Yes, so the Dhammaññū Sutta, the name of this discourse means Anyu is one who knows, and Dhamma, one who knows the Dhamma. And what this discourse does is, the way that I read it, is basically enumerate 7 different types of intelligence, which the Buddha praised as worthy of cultivation. In America, in Europe, in modern psychology, they talk about theories of multiple intelligence. You've got IQ, the intelligence quotient, which is a measure of a certain type of numerical and cognitive ability. But you've also got EQ, which many people have heard about, one's emotional quotient or one's ability to relate to others. There's also naturalistic intelligence and kinesthetic intelligence. But what this discourse does is enumerate 7 different types of intelligence, which the Buddha highlighted as being useful for the path of practice. So I'll just read the introductory passage. So a monk endowed with these 7 qualities is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of respect, an unexcelled field of merit for the world. Which 7? There's the case where a monk, a practitioner, is one with a sense of Dhamma, a sense of meaning, a sense of themselves, a sense of moderation, a sense of time, a sense of social gatherings, and a sense of distinction among individuals. So it might not come across so much in the translation, but all of those, a sense of, that those are all different versions of Anyu. So the knowledge of the Dhamma is the first one. The knowledge of the meaning is the second one. Knowledge of oneself, knowledge of moderation, knowledge of the time, knowledge of social gatherings, similar to EQ, and a knowledge of distinctions among individuals. So this will be the first of hopefully 7 different discussions where we go into each one of these different types of specific knowledge set, the different ways of knowing and appreciating experience, which the Buddha highlighted in this discourse. And the first one, which we'll be going over today, is Dhammaññū. One is a knower of the Dhamma. So maybe just one more word of preface. So the Buddha introduced this set of 7 Dhammas by saying this is what makes a monk worthy of gifts, worthy of offerings, worthy of hospitality, an unexcelled field of merit for the world. People who've been around monasteries, you might recognize that this is the formula, the standard formula for the Sangha jewel. So this, in Theravada monasteries all around the world, we chant that when we're chanting in praise of the Sangha. So that is, they are the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Such ones are worthy of gifts, worthy of offerings, worthy of respect. They're an unexcelled field of merit for the world. And I believe that these 7 qualities are not just specific to monks, are not just different cognitive skills, ability, the layers of genius which are especially helpful and make a monk worthy of supporting, but are really good for all of us to develop. So to flesh out this first type of intelligence of the Dhamma, so knowing the Dhamma, knowledge of the Dhamma, what does that mean? I thought one way to explore the connotations of what this means is to just give a survey of different usages of the word Dhamma in the Pali Canon. So primarily we'll be going over 6 different meanings. So 6 different distinct, or roughly distinct, I mean there's some overlap of these different meanings, but giving people a sense of the range in which the Buddha used this word Dhamma. And primarily we'll give 6 of those ways the Buddha listed that the Dhamma is used, or the way that the Buddha used the word Dhamma. But if you stick around to the end, there are 2 bonus meanings of the word Dhamma, which are also quite common, but maybe not so central to one's practice of the Buddha's teaching. So we'll start off with the meaning of Dhamma, which in English translations is often capitalized. So this is Dhamma with a capital D, which basically just means the teaching of the Buddha. So this is, if you've ever heard of the Dhamma Vinaya, so that capital D, Dhamma Vinaya, that is referring to the teachings of the Buddha specifically. So this is one meaning, and this is actually the meaning which is highlighted in this discourse, and I will read the passage from the discourse, which goes into how the Buddha framed basically a filing system for his teachings, okay? So here's what the Buddha says. So here, a bhikkhu knows the Dhamma. A bhikkhu is a Dhammaññū. If they know the discourses, they know mixed prose and verse, they know expositions, they know verses, they know inspired utterances, they know quotations, they know birth stories, they know marvelous accounts, and they know questions and answers. So this, at the time of the Buddha, the Pali Canon was not yet fully laid out. So the Buddha didn't just start speaking from the day after he attained enlightenment and then just speak the Sutta Pitaka, the Pali Canon, as we know it now. But he spoke different discourses to different people at different times. And today we've got the Pali Canon, and specifically the second aspect of the Tipitaka, the Sutta Pitaka, or the basket or the grouping of his discourses, which is organized in a certain way. Specifically, the Digha Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya, Anguttara Nikaya, Khuddaka Nikaya, the long discourses, medium-length discourses, grouped discourses, numbered discourses, and the miscellany discourses. But the Buddha didn't lay out his teachings like that. This was a later contribution, a later way of filing the Buddha's teachings. So what the Buddha did teach while he was alive was this 9-fold way of breaking down his teaching. Some of these different classifications or files If you know the Pali, you might recognize them. So the discourses, that's the suttas. You've got verses, which are gatha, inspired utterances, which are the udana. There's a whole book of the Khuddaka Nikaya called the Udana. The quotations, that's Iti Vuttaka. Another book of the Khuddaka Nikaya, which is called the Iti Vuttaka. Birth stories, that's the Jataka. Another book of the Khuddaka Nikaya. But these other ones are less familiar to modern readers who are used to just seeing Majjhima Nikaya, Digha Nikaya, Samyutta, etc. So what does this all mean? Like, how is this actually practical for someone who is trying to live the teachings, who really isn't so much interested in Buddhism, the study of Buddhism, the intellectual and scholarly study of Buddhism, but basically wants to put the Buddha's teachings in practice? What does it mean to be a Dhammaññū, one who knows his teachings in this sense? So I would suggest that whatever way you have of organizing the Buddha's teachings in your own mind is a useful process to go through. Yeah. So what I mean by that is figuring out a mental map or a mental filing system that works for you. So many people, from as soon as they created these different nikayas up until the present day, people have memorized whole sections of the canon. That people have memorized the whole Majjhima Nikaya. For people these days who don't have as much time to memorize, you can basically just file the discourses in any way which makes sense to you. Yeah. So you might, in your mind, have one part of your mind, whether it's a mind palace. I've talked about what that means in other talks. Or if it's literally a visualized filing cabinet, you can organize the poems that you've got memorized, so the poems that you're hearing, file them away in the section of poetry. So the Dhammapada would go here, the Iti Vuttaka would go here, etc. Or the Jataka stories. You've got a whole file system for the different stories that the Buddha told. So this is something which people who are traditional storytellers practice anyway, or non-Buddhist storytellers. You've got a repertoire of all these different stories that you've got stashed away and stored away and filed away in your mental filing cabinet. So this first way of Dhammaññū, this first way of being someone who knows the Dhamma, means to figure out a way of organizing the teachings in your head. Yeah, okay. So we'll go on to the second way of being, or the second meaning of Dhamma, and see how that might apply to being one who knows the Dhamma. So the second meaning of Dhamma, which we'll go into, is Dhamma as the law of the universe. Yeah. So this is not specifically limited to the teachings which the Buddha gave, all the words he spoke, but is what is referred to as the Dhamma Niyamata. So the fixed rules of the universe, the laws of the universe, referred to in commentary literature as the Nisata Nijivata. So those fundamental aspects of the way things are in the universe. So we could file, or we could think of the truths of anicca, dukkha, and anatta, the truths of impermanence, of selflessness, of unsatisfactoriness. These are laws of the universe. These are Dhamma with a lowercase d. Yeah, so we can reserve Dhamma with a capital D to the Buddha's teachings specifically. So the words which he said. But the Dhamma capital D, which he taught, is a subset of the lowercase d laws of the universe. This is a very famous discourse in which the Buddha says, he picks up a handful of leaves in a forest and says, which is more, the leaves in my hand or the leaves in the forest? The monks say, the leaves in the forest are a lot more. And the Buddha said, so too the truths which I awaken to on my day of enlightenment are like the leaves in the forest, but what I taught are the leaves in my hand. So the leaves in the Buddha's hand, what he taught, his words, what's preserved in the Tipitaka, that's capital D Dhamma, his teachings. But all the leaves in the forest are lowercase d, other laws of the universe, other things which are true, but which maybe he either didn't teach or have, maybe are true on a more overarching level. So that's Dhamma as laws of the universe. So how does this play out when we're trying to be Dhammaññū, one who knows the Dhamma? You can see the world in terms of three characteristics. So the three characteristics are universal truths, or if you don't want to accept that, you can take them as overarching hypothesis, And when you look at the world, you can see the world through the lens, or an exploratory lens of exploratory questions of anicca, dukkha, anatta. You can, when you see the shelf in front of you, you see the camera in front of you, you look at your computer and you say, this is impermanent. I got, this computer was given to me 5 years ago, and 50 years from now, chances are it will be falling apart. Chances are it will no longer be running. The plastic will be falling apart, keys will fall off. You see the world outside of you, you look outside, you see the clouds. These are not self. There's nothing inherently cloud with regards to a passing cloud. The car in front of you, this is anicca, dukkha, anatta. It's insubstantial. It's not self. There's nothing inherent about it. So that's the second meaning of Dhamma, natural laws of the universe. The third meaning is Sila Dhamma. So the truth of morality. So Buddha talked of Sila Dhamma. So the truths or the Dhammas regarding proper behavior. So Dhammacharya is one phrase he used. So that means charya, conduct, which is in accord with Dhamma, which is in accord with virtue. So how is this relevant? How do you be one who knows the Dhamma and make this practical in your life? You remember your precepts. You remember the principles which you're trying to live your life by. Those things which, the lines which you've drawn in your consciousness and your way of behavior, which you won't transgress, or you're trying not to transgress, those things which you are training yourself in. And you remember them because it's easy to forget them. If you were fully established in all of your morals, then it wouldn't really be a training. It would just be a reflection. But for many people, especially many people coming new to the Dhamma, and very many people who are convert Buddhists, you're coming to the Buddha because you've experienced dukkha, and oftentimes because you've experienced the direct link between craving and dukkha. Many people come to the Dhamma because of addiction, addicted to alcohol, drugs, food, work, whatever it is. You just don't know how to stop. We don't know how to stop our craving. We've set wheels in motion, and it seems like we're just being churned up by the gears which we set in place. But what we do is we remember our precepts. When we see things, we see environments, we approach situations which would test our morals, our principles beyond the level that we're comfortable with, then we stay away. So this is remembering the Dhamma of morality, being one who knows one's own morals. That's the third meaning of Dhamma. And the fourth meaning of Dhamma is another lowercase d, Dhamma, and that is Dhamma as in thoughts. So this comes up in relation to the sense doors and their objects. So the Buddha talks about the 6 internal ayatana, the 6 internal faculties. So the eye, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the mind. And he also talked about the objects of those 6 internal senses. So you've got sights, sounds, smells, taste, touch, and Dhamma with a lowercase d, phenomenon. So this is the 4th meaning of Dhamma. And so you've got the mind and Dhammas, the mind and thoughts, the mind and phenomenon. And this is the 4th meaning of Dhamma. And how is this practical? How do we relate to this so as to be ones who know phenomena, ones who know this lowercase d Dhamma? We practice seeing things as phenomena in and of themselves. So you can see this as being the 4th satipatthana, the Dhammaññū patipata. So Dhammanusaran, one who knows, one who sees phenomenon in and of themselves. The 4th foundation of mindfulness, one knows Dhammas in and of themselves, ardent, alert, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. When you interact with the world, you see things as just things. Yeah, it's this is just a conglomeration of elements, of things put together. The body has different causes which have made it exist here today. The Buddha statue, everything that is around you, everything is composed of phenomenon, composed of just constituent parts. Yeah. So I apologize. I'm realizing that I've confabulated. I've combined the 4th and 5th definition of Dhamma. So the 4th is Dhammas as thoughts, and the 5th, which I'm bleeding into, is Dhammas as just things. So we know thoughts in and of themselves, but we also know conditions in and of themselves. So that's sometimes there's a fancy word called nuamana, which is things in and of themselves without all of the labels that we slap onto them, without all the perceptions and names that we slather onto the things that we see. And then the 6th meaning of Dhamma, which we can discuss, is Dhamma as a synonym for Nibbana. So the Buddha would sometimes talk about one who has realized the Dhamma. And what he means by this is one who's realized Nibbana. So we can also think about this as a capital D Dhamma. So one who's realized Nibbana, who's realized the deathless, who's realized the goal of the path. And we can see things, we can be a Dhammaññū in this sense. Once we've practiced the path to completion, so we're not yet a capital D Dhammaññū, knower of Dhamma in the sense of enlightenment, until we actually have realized that fruit. But in the meantime, we can practice being knowers of all these other different meanings of the Dhamma. So just to recap, before giving the 2 bonus meanings of Dhamma, we've got 1, being knowers of the Dhamma in terms of the Buddha's teaching. So the Dhamma Vinaya, you have a framework for how you organize the Buddha's teachings in your own mind. You have Dhamma as the law of the universe, the 3 characteristics, seeing things in terms of anicca, dukkha, anatta. You've got Sila Dhamma, or morality, the Dhamma of Dhammacharya, the Dhamma of right conduct. You interact with the world in a way which you're always cognizant and remembering your principles and remembering your integrity. The 4th meaning is the Dhamma as thoughts, the counterpoint of the mind. So the object of the mind are thoughts. And you practice being a Dhammaññū in this sense by knowing thoughts as thoughts. You don't proliferate and create all sorts of stories out of individual thought elements, but you just know thoughts as thoughts. It's a thought of the past, a thought of the future, a thought of craving, a thought of aversion. Whatever it is, you just know thoughts is thoughts. And you've got the fifth meaning of Dhamma, which is Dhamma as things or component parts. Nuamana as basically just impersonal constituent elements. And finally, the sixth meaning of Dhamma is the Dhamma of Nibbana. So realizing the Dhamma. And when we practice the first 5 types of knowing the Dhamma, then we can realize that sixth, capital D Dhamma, the Dhamma of Nibbana, of cessation, of enlightenment, of dispassion and realization. The highest happiness, the highest peace. Okay. So if anybody has stuck through this far, then you've got the 7th and 8th bonus meanings of Dhamma, which come up in the Buddha's discourses. So we can say that the 7th meaning of Dhamma is, the word in this context, Dhamma, occurs in compounds. So that you say that something is anicca Dhamma, or something is subha Dhamma, or asubha Dhamma. So what this means is someone is the nature of craving. So that would be raga Dhamma. I'm not sure if that word actually comes up in the discourses, but anicca Dhamma certainly does, something which is of the nature to change. So when you put this word Dhamma at the end of another word, it means that such and such is a nature of change. So this Buddha statue is anicca Dhamma. It's of the nature to change. This little candle is anatta Dhamma. It's of the nature of non-personality. This body is asubha Dhamma. It's of a nature to be inherently not fully beautiful in every aspect, or in many aspects, actually. So you add the word Dhamma as part of a compound, and it becomes meaning of a nature too. So that's the 7th meaning of Dhamma. It's a lowercase d. And the final 8th extra bonus meaning of Dhamma is a meaning which you find more often actually in Hindu scriptures, but I do believe it possibly does come up in the Pali Canon as well. And that is the Dhamma as svat Dhamma, or one's personal duty. So people who are familiar with Vedic literature, say specifically the Bhagavad Gita, there's a lot on what it means. What is one's svadhamma? What is one's own personal duty, one's vocation, one's calling, one's meaning in life? And the Buddha doesn't actually really talk about this. This is very important in Hindu context. So Arjuna, the hero of the Bhagavad Gita, found out that his svadhamma was being a warrior. His calling, his vocation, his life's purpose was to be a warrior. So to go against that would be inappropriate. The Buddha never said that all of us are born with an inherent calling. So this is actually a distinction between Hindu thought, and also a distinction between modern Western or romantic thought. So many people think, what is my true calling in life? And think that there's something that you have to find. Like if you just experiment with enough professions, then one of those professions, like you experiment being a doctor and you're like, yes, I've found my calling. That's my svadhamma. That's what I was meant to do. And maybe so, in the sense that maybe you are called to do it. Maybe in a Buddhist sense, you might think that you've been doing it for many lives. So you're familiar with it, you love it, you enjoy it, you find gratification in it. But there's nothing in a Buddhist sense of saying that you're inherently have to follow that calling. So there's no sense of vocation. There's no magic occupation, which you just have to find. You really just have to figure out what works and, in a sense, make up your life's work, your life's calling. So those are 8 meanings of Dhamma, and maybe conclude the formal talk there and open things up for questions. And people can post any question you want in the chat box. And it can be questions about these 6 meanings of Dhamma, 6 meanings that occur in the Pali Canon of capital D and lowercase d Dhamma. Or it can be about these 7 different types of intelligence, which we'll be going over in the next several courses. Okay, can you please go over those 7 qualities which make one worthy of gifts, etc.? The 7 what you're calling intelligences. Yes. So those 7 intelligences, which we'll be going over in the next 6 conversations, will be: one has a sense, or one has a Dhammic intelligence. That's what we were talking about all today. One has an intelligent grasp of the Buddha's teachings. One has memorized the Buddha's teachings, if not in word, memorizing the framings, the frameworks, the different categories of Dhamma, and figuring out how you can apply those. So that's being a Dhammaññū. That's the first type of intelligence. The second type of intelligence is called Atthaññū, Attha-ññū. So this is one who knows the meaning, or has a sense of the meaning. Or Atta can also mean the goal. One has a sense of the goal, or even the essence. So it's not necessarily the case that you memorize all these different Dhamma discourses. You're a knower of the capital D teachings. You've memorized the whole Pali Canon, and you totally get it. This is, the Buddha highlighted, a different intelligence. This is a different cognitive skill. It's the intelligence to really see what is the pith, what's the heart of this teaching. So that's Atthaññū. The next one is Atthaññū, Atta-ññū. So being a knower of Atta, a knower of oneself. So this can be, I think, rightly equated with self-knowledge, knowledge of one's strong points and one's weak points. Atthaññū. This can be knowing which things are good for you to do and which things are not good for you to do. Those things which you should cultivate, the habits which you should practice, and the habits which you should give up. So that's knowing yourself. That's intelligent self-knowledge. I think in the Western theories of intelligence, this is called intrapersonal knowledge. So knowledge within oneself, intrapersonal intelligence. The fourth type of intelligence, which the Buddha talked of, is Atthaññū. So having knowledge or information, intelligence regarding the measure. So this refers to knowing the measure of food, being intelligent in how much you eat and how much you buy and purchase, and knowing what your limit is, what's good and what's too much, what is glut and surfeit and too much. So this is Atthaññū. You practice being one who knows the measure, and it's not too hard to see that IQ does not necessarily correlate with this Atthaññū. So this knowing of the measure, this MQ, this measure quotient. Many people who are extremely intelligent just have no sense of enough, whether it's regard to food, whether it's regards to wealth. People just, think I'm smart enough, I can figure it out, so I deserve to just, take in anything without any limit, or without any check. But that's just not very smart, and it's not really sustainable. So the Buddha highlighted this as a different form of intelligence, knowing the measure, being intelligent with regards to the measure of food and etc., the things you use. The fifth type of intelligence is Dhammaññū, having a sense of the time, being time intelligent. So what does this mean? I think it can mean a number of things. In this discourse, the Anguttara 768, the Buddha gives very specific meanings for each of these 7 different types of intelligence, and we'll go over those. And so in this discourse, he defines having a sense of time, or a time intelligence, as knowing what's the right time to listen, what's the right time to recite, what's the right time to go into seclusion, what's the right time to meditate. Or I think larger than that, it can be just knowing your own circadian rhythm, so knowing how much sleep you need, knowing whether you are a lark or an owl, whether you're a morning person or an evening person. It's knowing the time and the place. When is it the time for you to do your study? When is the time to go to work? When is the time to put away your work and go home? When is it the time to be with your family, to give time to your family? And this is a whole different realm of intelligence. Again, not necessarily bound to IQ. So many people who are very, very smart don't have their lives together, don't know how to manage their time and manage their temporal resources. But the Buddha highlighted this as being a worthy intelligence to cultivate on the path. The 6th type of intelligence is Parisaññū. So parisa is groups, so knowing the group. So this is one aspect of EQ, or emotional intelligence, or we could think of it as social intelligence. So the Buddha defines this, as we'll hear later on, as knowing this group here is a group of Brahmins, this is a group of warriors, this is a group of merchants, and knowing that, then you know how to speak to them. You speak in this way, you don't talk in this way, etc. So this is a sense of, social intelligence. And this is important, the Buddha highlighted, because none of us, even monks, can live entirely on our own. And the Buddha did establish the Sangha. He didn't establish as the primary mode of spiritual progress being one of just hermitude. It makes sense to get this in your mind. How do you approach different types of groups? And every group isn't the same. So figuring out what it means to relate to one group in difference from another group. And the 7th type of intelligence is Pugala Paro Paranyu. And so this means knowing the distinction among individuals. So you can think of this perhaps as interpersonal intelligence. And this is maybe either having an intuitive or an explicit and learned appreciation for different personality types. So knowing this person is more liberal, this person is more conservative, this person is really conscientious, this other person is less conscientious, this person is an extrovert, this other person is an introvert, this person really appreciates and gives value to being agreeable, this other person doesn't really value being easy to get along with. This person is neurotic. This other person is free from neurosis and anger and anxiety and worries. And so, yeah, becoming skilled, learning how to differentiate between people, because this goes to help our social intelligence when you can appreciate the people who are around you and know how to relate to individuals and as the results of their own upbringing and their own past karma, and not trying to force a one-size-fits-all onto the people who you interact with. So that's a long answer, but yeah, I look forward to going more deeply into these 7 different aspects of what it means, these 7 different cognitive abilities, these appreciations, these different skill sets that we can develop, and that the Buddha said would be helpful to develop in our progress in the Dhamma. So it seems like there aren't so many other questions. And if no one has any more questions, then we can just call it a day, and hope something here was worth reflecting on. And in general, I think figuring out how we can develop these different type of Dhammic intelligences is really important. The Buddha didn't just teach meditation. There's a whole armamentarium, a whole set of other tools which we can use. And it's good to learn about these things and to give value to them, and not to underplay or underwrite, or not give importance to some of these things, thinking maybe if you're feeling like you're very spiritual, that these things might be too worldly, that it's not really a Dhammic pursuit to figure out how to relate to people better, or to how to relate to groups better, or to get your own time schedule more under control. So I think that's enough for today, and hope everybody has a really good day, and hopefully see you next week, next Saturday, same time, 10 a.m. Okay, have a good day, everyone.